Few young people today are likely to appreciate the century-old comedic stylings of the Marx Brothers, the dynamic troupe of entertainers who made slapstick comedy an art form. Particularly resonant is a timeless remark in the movie Duck Soup, uttered by Chico Marx when he is caught impersonating his brother Groucho. Chico pleads in his own defense, "Who you gonna believe? Me or your own eyes?" Today, if you seek to understand the world and the larger universe in which you live, you must do so in the midst of instructions for mass media to simply not believe your own lying eyes. I think it should go without saying that most of us have occasionally encountered narratives promoted in mass media which apparently seek to render objective reality unrecognizable. In the face of such manipulations, assuming one has the capacity and understanding to recognize them, we feel uneasy, wary, and frustrated. And when the deceptions are particularly egregious, or in service of truly destructive ends, we feel outraged, shocked, and probably angry. Call it gaslighting, call it propaganda, call it manufacturing consent. By whatever name it goes, the demand that others, both individually and collectively, reject truth for untruth is an act that I can only call violent, leading inexorably to disaster and sometimes to genuine tragedy. Mr. Orwell was correct. Ignorance can never be strength. Slavery can never be freedom, nor war ever peace. Beyond the social, political, and geopolitical spectrum, even reaching to the sophisticated arena of cosmology and space science, the informational landscape is a maze that almost feels intended to induce cognitive dissonance. This is especially evident in discussions on the monarch of all cosmological theory, the Big Bang. For decades, science discovery has challenged, if not falsified, the very underpinnings of Big Bang theory. And yet, year after year, decade after decade, institutionalized science continues to allocate funds, develop technology, and design space missions based on the unshakable belief that the Big Bang definitely happened. Hence, resources have not been devoted to the development and exploration of alternative theoretical models, including at least one such model, plasma cosmology, with a well-established track record of many successes. Consequently, as I've lamented in countless previous presentations on this channel, the so-called crisis in cosmology only continues to grow with each new discovery. Such is again the case with new investigations into the so-called early universe. Scientists have recently discovered something, quote, impossible about a galaxy cluster first observed in 2010 from the South Pole Telescope in Antarctica. Following the usual assumption that cosmological redshift is a reliable indicator of an object's distance from Earth, it appears in standard reasoning to have formed just 1.4 billion years after the hypothetical Big Bang. However, its estimated temperatures raise a big problem for Big Bang theorists. A Science Alert report on this finding states, "A shadow cast on the faint, leftover glow of the Big Bang has revealed a giant object in the early universe that defies our predictions of how the universe should evolve. It's a galaxy cluster named SPT 234956. Spotted a mere 1.4 billion years after the Big Bang, the gas within it is far, far hotter than it should be. The gravitational heating of a galaxy cluster ought to be a slow process that takes billions of years to reach the temperature regime of said cluster. We didn't expect to see such a hot cluster atmosphere so early in cosmic history," says astrophysics doctoral student Dazi Zhu of the University of British Columbia in Canada. In fact, at first I was skeptical about the signal, as it was too strong to be real. But after months of verification, we've confirmed this gas is at least 5 times hotter than predicted, and even hotter and more energetic than what we find in many present-day clusters. The estimated temperature of the hot electrons in the, quote, intracluster medium connecting the galaxies is an incredible 10 million degrees. The following statement from the report could not be of more self-evident significance to members of the electric universe community. Based on existing models, there is no way gravity alone could generate this temperature. Unfortunately, though not surprisingly, the ad hoc guess investigators have offered is that jets from a few black holes in the cluster are responsible for providing, quote, extra energy, producing the impossibly hot temperatures. However, as the researchers themselves acknowledge, this kind of activity is not predicted at all for black holes just 1.4 billion years after the Big Bang. This is the definition of ad hocery, a desperate and costly resort to try to save a badly discredited theory from extinction. I have to briefly note here that a recitation of all the discoveries, including many recent ones provided by the James Webb Space Telescope, that undermine or, to put it more bluntly, falsify the standard Big Bang origins of the universe would require a much longer presentation. Only in this context can anyone fully appreciate individual, quote, impossible discoveries such as this latest. This includes the appearance of apparently massive galaxies and well-structured galaxies much too early in the Big Bang epoch, presumably young stellar populations in the so-called early universe, which show the characteristics of much older stars. Observations of dramatic activity from so-called supermassive black holes, much too early in the evolution of the, quote, early universe, as well as stunning images of Stephan's quintet, showing this quasar, which is supposedly over 10 billion light-years away, clearly in front of the dense dust lane of a galaxy just over 300 million light-years away. Recent scientific studies have also confirmed that the apparent current expansion rate of the universe appears far too rapid to explain by any conventional reasoning. All of this is to say, scientific discovery is only increasingly affirming the thesis of Halton Arp, which states that cosmological redshift is intrinsic and not a reliable indicator of an object's distance from Earth. In other words, the evidence has never been stronger that the universe is not expanding. There was no Big Bang, and at this moment, the universe is of unknown age and extent. The estimated super-hot temperatures of the aforementioned cluster's medium is simply the signature of electric currents, which connect objects at all scales throughout the cosmos. The evidence for this cosmic electrical circuitry is seen undeniably in the so-called cosmic web of intergalactic filaments, as well as networks of star-forming filaments, which show constant and near-constant width, a trait that is gravitationally impossible, but is an established trait of an electric current, as seen in this example of bead lightning on your screen. I have to return again to the intrinsic challenges of human perception, and the many obstacles, both internal and external, that obstruct one's effort to understand reality. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar famously, or perhaps infamously, stated of Halton Arp's paradigm-shattering thesis, "This exceeds my imagination." But I suspect what actually exceeded his imagination was not the plausibility of Arp's thesis. Rather, what was truly unimaginable was the professional ramifications for him and every other cosmologist if institutional science accepted that Arp was correct. As Carl Sagan wrote in his book, Broca's Brain, Reflections on the Romance of Science, if Arp is correct, if Arp's observations of associations between objects of widely different redshift are correct, then exotic mechanisms like black holes would be unnecessary. Of course, the theoretical toolkit of mainstream cosmology consists of almost nothing but exotic mechanisms. So I think that Sagan's statement reveals why institutional science not only rejected Arp, but actively took measures to obstruct his research, including denying him telescope time at the Palomar Observatory in the early 1980s. To really understand this point, imagine you're a monolingual best-selling author, and one day you learn that the only language in which you've ever communicated has been outlawed. Now you are facing untold years of study to try to master the endless nuances of an entirely new language, perhaps one that is highly counterintuitive to your education and experience. One cannot overestimate the earth-shaking challenges that Arp, as well as the concepts of plasma cosmology and the electric universe, pose to mainstream cosmology. I've never viewed astrophysicists as consciously malicious actors who seek to undermine scientific progress. Again, they are human beings, prone to the same biases, external influences, and tendencies towards self-interest as all the rest of us. I'll leave you with a quote from Albert Einstein, which seems increasingly ironic in light of the crisis in cosmology. Blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. I think this may ultimately be the fundamental challenge of human life, whether to accept the pronouncements of authority, no matter how logically spurious or evidentially challenged, or to instead nurture and hone the capacity for truly independent thought, perhaps beginning with the courage to simply believe one's own lying eyes.